Now, let's go into one of my absolute favorite methods of entering into leg locks out of half guard bottom. I'm not going to say this is the only method of doing it, but it is absolutely one of the most important for your development and probably the best one for you to be starting with. It gives a great opportunity to enter into either one of your opponent's legs. So that's a huge advantage. Your opponent doesn't know which side you're going to attack. This is always a good thing. It also gives considerably more space to attack into, so it doesn't require much flexibility on your part. If I only had one method of attacking from half guard for the rest of my life, I'd probably be looking at choosing this one. There are some other good options, but this one's damn good. So let's get this one into your game. We're going to start off with a training partner in front of us, and as you probably anticipated by the title, we're going to start with some form of knee shield. You have a choice between a low knee shield with your knee down here by the hip. If you rotate around, you have the choice between a closed knee shield where my ankles cross. Okay, that's very good, especially if I'm anticipating leg attacks from my opponent. If I'm not really anticipating leg attacks, you can also have the knee shield open. Okay, come back. You have the option of going high with the knee shield, with your knee positioned here in front of your training partner's shoulder. This too is an excellent method. Okay, so this one here, closed, is very good if I'm worried about his leg attacks. This one up here is very good for maintaining distance, and it gives me the ability to off-balance an opponent and force a hand down to the mat. Okay, and generate a little kazushi that breaks his stance and posture, forces a hand to the mat, and facilitates entries into the legs. Okay, so that's how we manipulate our knee shield in place. Now, what are we going to do here? We're going to take a scoop grip on our training partner. The knee shield is tremendous for distance management. It prevents our opponent from getting chest to chest. If he can get chest to chest, it's not very useful for us to grab scoop grips here, because he can just sprawl the leg back and put cross-leg pressure on and break the grip. However, if I start off with that knee shield in place, okay, he drives forward, he can't get chest to chest contact now. And combined with framing in here, makes it very possible for us now to get into that scoop grip. Once we get the scoop grip in place, we are going to turn from facing on our right shoulder all the way across onto our left shoulder. You can do this with locked hands, or you can do it with open hands. I leave it up to you. They're both great options. What I'm looking to do is to jack my opponent up into something like a 4-point position. Okay, Nick, just quickly show them a 4-point position. The 4-point position is where your opponent has 4 points of contact, the hands and the feet on the mat. He doesn't have knees on the mat. That would make it more than 4 points. Put a knee down. Now you've got 5 points of contact with the mat. We want just 4. So we want our opponent up like this. Okay? Because the legs are straightened and separated, it's pretty easy to go into your opponent's legs and start attacking with leg locks. So, from a situation where I start off, bottom half guard, we've got some form of knee shield, whichever one you favor, and we've got our frames in place like so. From here, I scoop inside my training partner's leg, and then my whole thing is to turn from facing to the south and coming across and facing in the opposite direction. Okay, out here to the north. And as a result, we get our opponent up here like so. Now, when we hit this, your opponents get nervous. Okay, you've established a reputation as a leg locker. What they often do is they go up into this 4-point position because they're going to try and flee the mat. They're going to try and get away from you. Okay, we'll look at how to deal with people who don't take their knees off the mat after this, I promise you. But realistically, guys, most of your opponents will be looking to get their knees off the floor. So we go in on our training partner, and from here I push into him. I wait for that pushback reaction, and then from here my knees come in, and we just bump our opponent up, and he floats on top of our shin, just like so. Okay, so what takes him over and up and gets those knees off the mat is this knee on the belly button here. Okay, so as I engage initially with my training partner, he's pushing into us. We're forming our frames across the body like so, and I go and I get my scoop. You can lock your hands, or you can just stay in like so. Now watch how my knee and the belly button brings him up and floats up on the shin like so. So what have we got at this point? You've got a situation where you've got direct control of the leg that's closest to you. You have your legs perpendicular to your opponent, so you've got the perfect attacking angle, and he's elevated so his legs are relatively straight and separated. This is literally as good as it gets when it comes to attacking the legs. This is there's no better situation than this, okay? So this is, you've created the ideal situation to go in and start attacking. We don't want our opponent turning to face us, so usually we post on his body just like so. And from here, numerous ways for us to go in and attack the legs. The first one we're going to look at today involves me taking my foot and pommeling it right there in front of my training partner's hip. So I take my foot from behind his leg, pommel it through, and place it in front of his hip. As a result, I'm able to move my body to form an angle like so. Now I pommel my second leg around the corner and fit it through and around my training partner's leg like so. The big danger now is my opponent will flee the mat and get away from us. So I'm going to take my hand and pin it to my chest. My opponent's foot functions like the knot at the end of a rope. So when he goes to flee the mat, it's stuck in place. We can even do an experiment here where I take my Ashigarami out and he goes to flee the mat. And just this grip alone will hold me in place, even without an Ashigarami. But if I go around the corner and lock up and form that ideal connection, even more so now. When he goes to yank out, it's well nigh impossible. It's a very controlling form of grip. My biggest concern is that my opponent will backstep. And this will create a situation where you still have the potential of a lock, but unfortunately, you also have the potential that he can start going after your legs. So I have to now lock a triangle, and then he can start bringing his feet in defensively and causing problems for me. Okay, so I don't want him backstepping. Let's face, so your butt faces the camera.
Okay.
So once we lock in here, and I have my foot in place, we often lock over the top of that far leg. So when he goes to backstep, it's difficult. The only way he could conceivably backstep is to remove my foot, and that takes time. Okay, your leg is stronger than his hand. So when he goes to move it, it's a bit of a battle. And then in that time frame, we take our training partner's foot and we push it right through and put it behind our tricep. So that even as my opponent successfully clears the foot across, you're in a position now where you can follow through and end up with a tremendous opportunity to break his leg. Okay, from here we go through into our conventional breaks. So once again, starting off in front of a training partner, half guard situation, initially knee shield in place, frames in place. From here, I go through and catch. My knee goes across my training partner's belly button as I push into my opponent. Now I take everything in the opposite direction and he floats on top of my shin bone. From here, we go 2-on-1. I pommel my foot behind his, from behind his leg to in front, and I use that to move his body. Then from here, this leg goes from in front, around behind, and threads in front of our training partner's calf muscle. In front of his thigh muscle. Second leg locks in behind the knee. He goes into a back step, can't do it. He's going to have to remove my foot. That takes time. In that time, I take my training partner's foot from the bottom shoulder across my chest towards the top shoulder. I form a V grip, put it in my training partner's inside foot. He goes to move around, and look how I move my whole shoulder in front of his foot. There's always the battle to get his shoelaces behind my tricep. That's always the fundamental battle here. Okay, he goes to move around, and from here, look how I just take everything across in front, and that's what locks him in place. Now, even if he did have the strength to take my foot off the back of his leg, I would have the ability from here to follow through and get my feet into one of our favorite breaking positions. Down on the mat, we're back heeling in and driving forward for a very strong finish. Let's look at this from other angles so we get to see more details. Okay, half guard situation, like so. We form good frames across our training partner's body. I go in behind my training partner. My knee goes across my training partner's stomach, and as we push into the man, we bring him back and float him up there on our shins. I go to a 2-on-1 grip, I pommel my foot through and around and hook right there in front of his hip flexor muscles like so. As I extend him away, I go through and around. My shoelaces locking on my training partner's frontal thigh. If I just stayed in this position, he could backstep and potentially cause problems. It's not the end of the world. There's still good things I can do, but wasn't the control that I was looking for. So instead, I pass my foot over the back of his hamstring. He goes to move from here. It's going to take time. He goes to flee the mat, and you're locked in place. Now we take our training partner's foot, we bring it across the chest, and we focus on pushing it behind our tricep. From his perspective, he wants to try and turn his foot in a direction where he doesn't generate heel exposure. So our whole thing is to get everything in behind, and you'll see we have heel exposure now. As he finally clears my foot off, we want to be in a situation where I can bring my feet right in here, where they're defensively sound. I have a foot over his hip, and I have a foot here inside his legs. This crisscrossing of my legs creates an extraordinary sense of control over my opponent. Just this foot across his leg, he goes to turn out, makes it difficult. It functions like a 50-50. This one here functions like an inside senkaku. So you have the benefits of both inside and outside position. As he tries to fight, thumb posting, etc., pushing away, it's a difficult thing to get away from. And then from here, you get very strong breaks. The best breaking positions are generally down here with our knees towards the floor, pulling the hips in and working like so. Okay? So once again, we're here in front of our training partner. We form those initial frames. We come in and get that man floating up on our shin bones just like so. I pommel my foot through, shift him away. There's my shoelaces in front of my training partner. There's my leg over the top. We take our training partner's foot. If you just rotate to your left a little. Good. There's the control we want. We connect his shoelaces in there towards our chest. Now the whole thing is to get my triceps in front of his foot. So as I push the foot back, I bring triceps in front. Now as we flare back, we get that good lock in place. There's an excellent connection to our training partner's exposed heel. He's going to want to take this foot out. I won't make it easy. I would try to break in this position. That's definitely my intention. But in a competitive situation where he's willing to take some pain, there may well be a time where he comes out. When we see that, I just follow my training partner's hips. As my legs lock in, we find ourselves in the perfect position to push the pelvis forward and go into our break. So this is your first method of attacking your opponent's leg out of this very, very good attacking situation. One of the great advantages of this scooping method of getting our opponent's body weight floating over us, floating over our shin, is it gives you many different options, varieties of Ashigarami to go in and actually connect your opponent's legs and hips and get to your breaking positions. It's just a really versatile means of attacking people. Let's have a look at some of those variations now. Okay, we've got an opponent in front of us. We've got our knee shield in place that enables us to govern distance to some degree. We've got our frames in place, and as a result, we're able to go through and get to our scoop grip. From here, my shin goes across my training partner's body, and I start the action of floating them up into the air. In the previous move, I brought this foot here in front, okay, and moved my opponent away. This time, as we get to our standard grip, we lock right there over the Achilles tendon, locking his shoelaces over the bicep, so if he goes to pull away, you're well connected to your opponent. This time, we're going to post on our training partner's hip, just like so, and I'm going to pass my foot through, and my foot goes down the line where the buttocks meet the hamstrings. Okay, just like so. From here, I lock the figure of four, and I put my shoelaces right there on my training partner's oblique muscles and rib cage. As a result, when we push in on our training partner and control him, his foot comes down towards the mat, and you have an excellent control over him. We lock up our training partner's heel and take advantage of the good heel exposure we have. Now, guys, a word to the wise. Whenever we go into backside finishes, One of the big problems we face whenever we work with an inside Senkaku is you have no method of pushing into your opponent's back leg. Okay. Ideally, what I want anytime I'm going for backside finishes is some form of ability to push into his hamstring, the back of the leg, the back of the knee. If I lack that, and this is usually the case when we go with variations of inside Senkaku, my opponent can straighten out his leg and push back into me and destroy my ability to control a leg. Okay? So one of the best ways for us to combat this is to go from a situation where my inside Senkaku is locked over his back to one where it comes here in front of his oblique muscles. So I take my foot from the back to the front of his body. What's the significance of this? It means that my left leg, the lower leg, is converted into a lever. And as a result, I can now point my knees at the ceiling and lever my opponent over so that he goes from facing the mat to facing the ceiling. Not only that, but when we land on the other side, we have the shoelace Senkaku, one of the tightest versions of Ashigarami. When he goes to thumb post and move out and do all those things that people do, it's an enormously tight connection. And from here, we get very, very strong finishes. Whether we stay up off the mat on an elbow or whether we drive forward with the hips down on the shoulder. Okay? So, when you hit the inside Senkaku, you lose the ability, the important ability, to push on the back of the leg. Notably, the area of the hamstring close to the knee. This is a severe deficiency. So the way we make up for this is to use the shoelace Senkaku, put our foot in front and lever our opponent over onto his back. Onto his butt. When he lands on his butt facing us, you no longer have the problem associated with backside finishes, which is the need to push into the back of his hamstring. And as a result, you get very strong face-to-face finishes with a particularly tight version of inside Senkaku. So once again, we're here locked up with our training partner. We go in, we get our frames, and we lock up. My shin goes across, and I get my opponent floating up on my shin. From here, I pommel to the inside. I place my foot on the hips, and we're in the perfect position now to lock up a good tight inside Senkaku. If I'm naive and keep my foot here, even if I did get the heel and lock it in place, it wouldn't be much good to me because my opponent could straighten his leg, push back into me, and destroy my control over the leg. So what I do is I take my foot and I put it right there in front of his hip. When he goes to push back into me now, it's suicide. Gives me an easy lever. It puts him in a situation where I have maximum heel exposure, and from here we just drive forward with the hips and we're ready to break. Okay? This is such a tight triangle around my training partner's leg that when he goes to scoot back, pull away, do all those things that people do, it's well nigh impossible, and we're ready now to break the leg. So this represents an excellent way for us to use a shoelace Senkaku, a useful variation of inside Senkaku, to put extreme pressure on an opponent, even when we're behind them, convert it from a backside finish to a frontside finish, and finish in a particularly tight version of Ashigarami, which makes for very strong breaks. Now, let's look at the notion of attacking the far leg. It's an important skill. We should be able to attack both of our opponent's legs. Everything we've done so far, we attacked the leg that was closest to us with that scoop grip. Now let's look at attacking the far leg as well. Okay, once again, we start off with the training partner here in half guard. We're doing a good job of managing distance, courtesy of that knee shield. When he drives forward, we've got our frames in place, controlling both of the shoulders with one arm, and as a result, we're able to go through and get that training partner elevated up on our shins. Okay. Now, this time, when we start off in the scoop position, instead of attacking the leg that's closest to us, let's start looking at attacking this far leg. From here, we're going to pommel our foot right there in front of our training partner, and we find ourselves now in a situation where it's easy for us. Previously, we pommeled this foot in front. Okay. Now we pommel this foot in behind. And as a result, we're able now to go directly into variation of reverse X guard. Our whole thing from here is to take his hips from in front of us to over us, just like so. As the hips come over us, we reach through and we take both our hands to both legs. So you lock them in just like so. From this position, we punch up and lock. As we bring our training partner down to the mat, we find ourselves in a good situation where both his legs are laced together. When he tries to flee the mat and scoot away, this will always be one of the strongest ways of controlling an unruly opponent. Now, this comes at a price, and that price is that my opponent can turn his toes defensively, so that when I release the secondary leg, you get into a situation where you have to follow your opponent's leg, and this can always be problematic. Okay? So as much as possible, from here we want to stack the odds in our favor. One excellent way for us to do this, if he has his arms spread out wide, is to tilt him in the direction opposite his escape. That's the direction of his escape. I tilt him away from his escape direction. So I lie down, I extend my left leg and tilt him over. As a result, it's very easy for us now to catch our training partner's heel. Even as my opponent goes into his defensive turn now, he finds himself locked up in that same shoelace sankaku that we had earlier. When he goes to continue the turn, he feels like he'll break his own leg. Okay, it's an unusually tight connection. The sankaku is locked so close to the floor that when he goes to turn out, it's awfully difficult. And from here, once we lock up, we find ourselves in the perfect position to get very strong breaks indeed. If he goes to thumb post on the shoelace sankaku, the wrap is so tight around my training partner's leg that even when he pushes with all his might, it's very difficult, and we quickly get breaks on our opponent. Once again, starting off in front of our training partner. There's the knee across, whether we go here or here, doesn't really matter, just as long as we float them up over our hips like so. As we post on our training partner, look how my front leg pommels through and around, back leg comes through, and I lift and turn his hips over my head. As a result, we're able to catch, draw the legs in, and put our man straight down to the floor. As he tries to pull away from us, look how we take him over in the direction opposite his escape, so that we can quickly take advantage of the exposed heel and lock up. When he comes back, you can clearly see my shoelaces have come through, showing that this is a shoelace sankaku. My triangle is locked between his legs, but my foot is on the outside. So when he goes to scoot and slide, do all those things that people do, it's just such a tight connection. And from here, we drive forward, hits in, and it's done. So this is another excellent way to attack the legs out of this situation. Now, we've been looking at this idea of using a scoop grip and making our opponent float over our body using the shin to support our training partner's weight and put them up into a 4-point position. Now, it's my contention that this is one of the most effective ways of entering an opponent's legs from half guard bottom. It has the advantage of creating space from start to finish. The knee shield creates a space at the start, and the shin underneath enables us to float our opponent and put them into a 4-point position over us. We've got plenty of space to turn into. You can attack either one of your opponent's legs. That's a wonderful thing. But I'm always pushing on you the idea that everything in jiu-jitsu comes at a price, okay? As something gets good in a certain way, that must always come at the price that there will be some detracting or bad quality on the other side of it. So what's the bad quality associated with making our opponent float on our shin? Well, the 4-point position is very open to submission hold, but it's also a very mobile position. If you put Nick Ortiz in a 4-point position, you will see that he can run very rapidly across the mat from that position. You will also see that from 4-point, he can easily backstep a leg and heist over like so. So it's a good position to attack from, but the problem associated with it, there's a lot of movement potential from this position, and your opponent will use that against you. So it's important for you, if you're going to start leg locking people from half guard, that you have the ability to control movement from this position. Let's have a look at that right now. Okay, we've seen that from our start position, the knee shield creates space, and that gives us the ability to turn into an opponent, and from here take them up into that float position. Now, this is great because the knees are far apart so you can attack either leg. There's a ton of space to turn into, but it comes at the price that our opponent can run away from us. Okay, so how are we going to control this kind of movement? Well, one of them we've already alluded to. That's the skill of coming around the corner and putting a foot there in front of our training partner and rotate around this way, buddy. When we go through and around, we want to be able to capture our training partner's shoelace right there on the bicep. This is a very, very strong form of connection. Okay, as I've always at pains to point out, the foot functions like the knot at the end of a rope, so that when we close our hands over it and he goes to pull away from us, it's like trying to pull a very thick knot through a very narrow hole. It's just not going to happen. The hole will catch over the knot, and as he goes to yank out, you've got tremendous connection there, and that will stop someone from running away. Unfortunately, it will not stop them from backstepping. Okay, it's not the end of the world because there's still good attacks I can do from here. So the second form of, come up on your base, buddy. The second form of attack movement we have to be able to control is the back step. And we do that by using the double 50 position. So you're in a 50-50 Ashigarami and double 50 because you pass it over the second leg as well. So when he goes to back step, my right leg makes it difficult. Okay. Now, another key element here. What if we had an inside Senkaku? Like so. Well, now, go back to your 4-point jam. You run into that same problem. When the leg is centered in the middle of my body by my belly button, his knee by my belly button, when he goes to walk out of here, it's pretty easy for him to do so. Okay, it puts a lot of pressure on my ability to hold him. So what we always want to do is to put a bend in his leg that brings his knee down towards the floor, just down here, okay? When he goes to pull out now, the bend in the leg makes it significantly more difficult. I don't want my body flat on his back and his knee over my belly button. Rather, what I want is a significant bend in his leg and his knee pointing down towards the floor. Now when he goes to yank out, it's significantly more difficult. Okay, that's what makes for a quick transition into the lock. So the three key elements of control here. When someone's up in this 4-point position, once we work from a position like so, first is to go around the corner and put the lock of my arm right there by the Achilles tendon, so that his foot functions like a knot at the end of the rope. If I have any version of 50-50, I want to make sure I step over the leg to prevent backstepping, and I use my arm like so to lock him in place. If I've made a commitment to inside Senkaku, then I want to make sure his knee points down towards the mat. And when we make the transition through to inside Senkaku, when he goes to flee the mat, it's difficult because the leg is well bent and well controlled. What I don't want with any form of inside Senkaku is the knee directly over the belly button. When I'm trying to hold like so and he goes to yank out, it's very, very hard to control and keep his knee between our knee line. Okay? So we always want to be on our side and his knee well bent. As a result, we can quickly pass through and lock. Once you get it in behind, it's yours. He goes to move around from here, very, very difficult. Even if he did go to back step now, it would work against him rather than for him. He'd be rolling right into an even better breaking position. So those are three key elements of control. Double 50 to stop back steps, using the knot theory to prevent people from just running out the minute you make contact, and making sure that our opponent's knee doesn't rest over our belly button, but rather points down to the floor anytime we opt for inside Senkaku variations. Now, let's go further into our leg locks from half guard. The movement we're about to look at now is arguably the most effective in competition for my students. It has some similarities to the leg lock entries we've seen so far, but it involves less lifting and elevating our opponent and more about spinning up and inverting onto our shoulders and working from a screw grip around our training partner's far leg and spinning around our training partner's legs. You can finish this in various ways. We'll look at a bunch of them. Okay, we've got an opponent working down here from half guard, and we've locked any form of knee shield you like across, so we're governing distance courtesy of the knee shield, whether it be high or whether it be low. And from here, we've managed to go through and get a catch around our training partner's far leg. Now, you can work with open hands, but most people are more comfortable, make a strong wide base, going in here and locking up the hands in this position. Now, what I want to do is start to invert my body and come up onto both of my shoulders. The problem is you'll have opponents putting body weight forward onto you. In the previous set of moves, when people did that, what we did was to go underneath them and float them up on our hips, just like so, okay? But now your opponent's getting a little smarter, and they're, as it were, moving their body weight back and away from you, down at the hips, walking back and away, and yet you feel like you couldn't lift them up as you did for the previous moves. Okay, whenever we see the energy of our opponent's hips is going backwards, one thing we want to get into a habit of is taking our leg up like so and forcing this hand to the mat. Why? Why is that a big deal? When we're coming in here and gripping at the legs, they're going to be trying to interfere with your grips and pull grips off, etc., and interfering. So I prefer it. You don't have to, but it's preferable to have this hand on the mat. And a simple half scissor makes that pretty easy to do. I just take my leg and I bump the hand down to the floor. That does two things. It gets his head away from me. He can't use his head as a block. If his head is a block, it's hard for me to invert and spin into the mat. Okay, and make sure that that hand can't interfere with my grips or what have you. So as we start off down here on the floor, use that half scissor to knock the hands down to the mat, and then from here we come up and we get our knee pointing down at the floor, just like so. From a situation like this, it's very possible for us to start coming up into inverted positions. And from a situation like this, one initial grip that we can do is to open up our hands and switch across onto both of our training partner's legs. Now, we can use our other leg as a pendulum to send our opponent through and start locking up both of our training partner's legs. So let's have a look at this again. We're here, the training partner is in our half guard. We have the beginnings of a shield in place. We've got our usual frames in place. And then from this position, I force the hand down towards the mat using that half scissor action, where one leg scissors back and the other one scissors forward and forces his hand down to the mat and starts to clear out our training partner's head. My hands come through and start a locking action. I pull my knee up and across my training partner's waist, and from here we're in a good position to come through into this inversion. From the inversion, my hand goes across and we grip both of our training partner's legs. My second leg functions like a pendulum, and I throw with my leg between his legs, my opponent straight down through the mat, and we lock up on our training partner's legs. Once again, there's a training partner here in front of us. We have a knee shield in place, and you're holding your training partner off. From here, we hit that half scissor, we force his hands down to the mat, and then we start an action of pulling our body around the corner. From here, I throw myself into an inverted position. I grab a reverse double leg, two hands on his two legs. I don't care if he tries to put hands on my legs, that's irrelevant. From here, we just use our legs like a pendulum. And that pendulum puts him immediately down to the mat and into a winning position. Now, all seated. Once we get to a position like so, you have excellent control over your training partner's movement. If he tries to pull away, flee the mat, anything of that nature, it's very, very difficult. The problem associated with this is that at some point, I have to let go of the secondary leg. When I go to let go of the secondary leg, one of the big dangers we face is our opponent going into a turning escape. When they turn, I can no longer access their heel. Okay, and this can be a constant problem. So, when we go to let our training partner's leg go, look how I take my hand, I go between my training partner's legs and I hold the knee tendons right in like so. So that when I go to release my training partner's leg from here, I'm going to place my forearm right there in front of my training partner's instep. When he goes to turn out and I go to turn out with him, this will create a situation where as we turn together, I will have my grip in front of my training partner's heel. I have a choice now between rotating through right back into the same position we had, or making a switch off into 50-50. I'll demonstrate both. There's our start position. What I don't want to do is just release the leg and have him turn away from me, and I'll never get to my opponent's heel. So I go through and I lock right there at my training partner's knee tendon. As I go to release, I place my forearm right there in front of my training partner's heel. When we go to turn through, that forearm, or conversely, my tricep, forearm, tricep, ensures that my training partner's instep stays behind me. It's a race. He wants to win the race by keeping his foot in front of my armpit. And if we roll like so, I'll never get a hold of his heel. What I want to do is to get my tricep or my forearm in a position where his shoelaces get caught behind my arm. So when I go to release this leg and I hold, as I feel that release go in place, we want to make sure we catch. Okay? When we go into a rolling encounter now, we're in a position where we get to our training partner's heel every time for the win. Conversely, there's going to be times you feel your opponent's faster than you are. And when you go into a situation where you go to roll out, you feel you can't get control of your opponent's instep, you can't get either the tricep or the forearm in front. In these situations, just place your hand underneath and let your opponent roll into an Achilles lock. So as he goes to roll, we go through and we just take an Achilles lock, just like so. Okay. Now, as we go to roll through, I'm going to switch my foot position. So he goes into the turn, until I block behind my training partner and switch off into a 50-50 from backside. Now from here, we lock up. He goes to roll through a second time. My leg position makes it impossible, and we get a quick submission. From a different angle. We're locked up with our training partner. When I release the secondary leg, he goes to turn on the primary. From here, I go through and lock. So I have like an Achilles lock on my training partner. Now, as he tries to dig his way out of here and flee the mat, all those things that people do, we just find our training partner's foot on the far side. Now, from here, we're in the perfect position to attack. If he stays where he is, we'll finish right here. If I see my opponent roll through, that's fine. We'll come down to the inside shoulder and finish right here. Now, let's have a look at the movement as a whole from start to finish. From a half guard situation, we move out on our training partner. We've got an initial knee lever in place, and from here I use that half scissor to force the hands down to the mat. My knee goes across in front of my training partner, and as a result, we can come up into an inverted position. I have a good grip with two hands on my training partner's leg. If he goes to pull that leg away from me, it's a difficult thing. It also makes it easy to switch across to the second leg. As he tries to pull away from me, we just use a combination of our two arms and my free leg to send my training partner through. From here, we're in the perfect position to go on the attack. We lock up our training partner's knee tendon. As we go to release our training partner's secondary leg, there's our tricep in place. As he goes to roll on through, we find ourselves in the perfect position to go through and get to our lock and expose our training partner's heel. You have a choice now of staying with your feet on the inside. You can take your legs and crisscross them, so you have one on the inside, one on the outside, or if you wish, you can go through
into a 50-50 situation, and from here finish on the inside shoulder. All of them are excellent options out of this position. Let's look at a variation of this move where instead of using a flipping of our opponent in a forwards direction, we use a Kani Basami type movement to scissor our opponent over from the side. So, same initial position. We've got any variation of the knee shield you like. We go in and get to our training partner's hand, force his hand to the mat, and then from this position, we start climbing up and around our training partner's leg. Now, as we feel our opponent pushing into us, and making things difficult for the previous move, we're just going to change our head position. And from here, I'm going to bring my leg around my training partner's body and put it right here, so behind my training partner's knee. My focus now is on getting my knee to face my training partner's stomach. How do I do this? By taking my leg and reverse shrimping. I take my leg and extend it, and I face my training partner like so, sit him down to his abs. That creates a situation where my knee is propped up behind his knee, and now we're in the perfect position to lengthen out our training partner's leg. If you want, you can go across and secure the secondary leg, or you can go directly on the attack. That will be up to the situation in which you find yourself. So once again, we start off in a half guard knee shield type situation. Force his hand down to the mat. Our knee goes across his body. Instead of us inverting around our training partner and throwing him in a forwards direction towards the camera, we're going to bring our leg around our training partner's body, and from here, sit down into a situation where you have something like a Kani Basami type hold on his legs, a kind of scissor takedown. Now, if he comes forward towards me, that creates problems. So what I want to do is take my knee towards his belly button. From here, we can either lock up our training partner's primary leg, or we can go across to the secondary leg. My preference is almost always to go after the secondary leg first. Why? Because when you get too greedy and start going for the primary leg, a good opponent will always turn his toes away from you and make it very difficult to secure the heel. Okay? So most of the time, we get better control of opponents by first locking up the secondary leg. Once we attack the secondary leg, now things slow down. If he tries to flee the mat and get away from you, you have excellent control over your opponent. This is going to make it possible for you to start exposing your training partner's heel in numerous ways that we've looked at in previous videos. If you're new to the game of leg locking, one excellent way to operate in these situations, if someone goes to take their secondary leg out, is for us to go around and lock up with a basic Achilles lock around our training partner's leg like so. Now we know what their game is. They want to turn. As a general rule, our philosophy of leg locking is that we want to use multiple ashiguramis to get to one lock. I want to get to an inside heel hook. I currently have inside foot position. If I see my training partner go to rotate out, I will come up and I will insert my foot behind their opposite knee. As a result, I can commit down to the mat on the other side and switch from an Achilles lock to a heel hook. You now have several outstanding options. One is to put my shoelaces in front of his far thigh, lock up, and get severe braking pressure. That's certainly one great option. Another is to go into a more conventional 50-50 situation and lock up backside 50-50. Here, I have the so-called double 50. Both of his legs controlled. If he tried to back step out of this, it would be very, very difficult indeed. Conventional 50-50s don't offer the same amount of control of the other leg, the secondary leg. So now the main danger is my opponent will backstep. That's not the end of the world. Just make sure you follow and come down onto your inside shoulder for strong braking pressure. Another fine alternative under these situations is for us to switch off to a version of inside Senkaku. Now, be aware that if we go for a basic inside Senkaku in this position with my foot on his back, this is not a particularly strong braking position because my opponent can pressure back into me, straighten out his leg, and create poor braking conditions. So what we want to do is take our foot from behind him to in front of him. That enables us to convert this from a backside situation to a front side situation. And from here, you have an excellent Senkaku that's very, very tight around your training partner's knee. It creates very, very strong braking conditions. Okay, so let's have a look at all of that again. So I'm double seated. Just a really robust way to work under these circumstances. The general philosophy that we work with is you want to be able to go through multiple ashigaramis, sometimes switching inside and outside foot position, in order to get to strong finishing positions where our ashigarami points in the opposite direction of his escape. If I release my training partner's foot, the direction of his escape is out here, to my right. My ashigarami, my knees are pointing in the same direction as his escape. I'm actually helping him to escape. So what I want to do is I want to follow his escape, but I don't just want to follow and follow and follow until we come off the mat. I want to follow and then change the direction of my ashigarami. That's the key. So right now you can see the direction of my ashigarami is revealed by the direction my knees are pointing. They're pointing out there. As we go into the turn, I take my Achilles lock and hold him in place. Now, as he tries to continue the roll, I just put my foot right here behind his opposite knee. Now I thread my foot through and I face here. That was the direction of his escape, you remember? Well, now my knees are pointing in the opposite direction of his escape. So as he goes to continue his turn, my knees won't allow him. He needs to go this way, but my heel hook is going this way. If he went to rotate out now, he would shred his own leg. Even if he managed to disentangle my double 50 foot from here, it would be an easy thing to follow him over. Okay, you have an excellent control of your opponent now. As he goes to fight his way out of here, you have such a powerful control over the legs. It's curtains, it's done. And you've stopped that rolling sequence. Okay, so let's have a look at all of that together again. Working from half guard bottom. We have an initial knee shield in place. We have our frames in place. We have a Kazushi that forces his hand down to the mat and creates an opening for us to get into our training partner's legs. As we lock up, we bring our knee across our training partner and start coming up and turning around the corner. I want to get my knee in behind his knee. From this situation, I'll go ahead and rotate down to the mat, and I use that Kani Basami action to turn him over and down to the floor. I make a choice now. Will I go directly after the secondary leg? After the primary leg, or will I go across and control the secondary leg? Most of the time, I urge you to go after the secondary leg. It gives you greater control with this simple leg lace. Turn around. So you have good control here. At some point, however, I have to release the secondary leg so I can break the primary leg. The problem is when we go to release the secondary leg, he will go into a turn away that hides his heel from us. Okay, so that's always the problem we face. So I want to slow that turn down by holding onto the knee tendon. As he escapes his secondary leg, I want to focus on keeping my elbow in front of his foot. As we go into a full turn, it's another difficult thing for us to slip forward into this Achilles lock. That prevents him from coming back and exposing my back. Okay, he'll break his own knee if he tries to take my back under these circumstances. Now I place my shoelace behind his opposite knee. I send my arm through and I rotate through. As I rotate, I switch and expose my training partner's heel. So I went from an Achilles hold to a heel hook hold. I thread my foot through and we find ourselves now in a beautiful braking position. You can lock up and break conventionally. You can go into an even stronger reverse figure four. If you should feel your opponent disentangling his leg, you have a bunch of good options from here. One is to stay with the crisscross. That happens to be one of the squad favorites. Coming back. Now, another great option is to switch off into classic 50-50 backside. When he backsteps, it will convert the front side. So we recommend coming down to your inside shoulder. That way, it won't be so easy for him to access your hands and hand fight you, and you'll get your breaks. Another option is to go across to inside Senkaku. But be aware of the limitations of this hold. In the backside situation, an opponent can push her back into you and cause problems. So to prevent that from happening, I use my left lower leg as a lever. So when he pushes back into me, I can lever him over and convert from backside to front side. Now from here, we drive forward and go into our conventional finishes. So there's the use of Kani Basami from half guard bottom, and some effective ways to go from the initial catch on the leg all the way through to a good finish. One of the interesting features of half guard is you have one leg on the inside and one leg on the outside. That gives you a lot of versatility in how you go to attack your opponent's legs. Sometimes what we'll do is in the midst of the action, convert from one outside, one inside to both inside. And this will give you some really useful and effective ways of entering into your opponent's legs and getting to your submission holds. Okay, same starting position. We've got a guy looking down on the mat. We've got our knee shield in place. From here we get across, we send his hand down to the floor, just like so. Okay. From these kinds of situations, you'll see that my left foot is currently on the outside. There will be many times where, because you've done a good job of creating kazushi and taking his head and hand away from you, from a situation where your hands are locked, you're going to be able to take this foot and thread it from outside position here to inside position here. Once we get that inside position, from here, I want to be able to lower and move my lower leg, okay? Watch my lower leg start moving, and we start taking our man out of balance. Now, as he comes back into me, there's going to be many opportunities from here for us to come up like so. And as we do so, we're going to be able to come up on our shoulders. Once we come up on our shoulders from here, you will see that I have a leg which can drive him forward, and then my other leg can easily come around behind my opponent and lock the figure of four. Once we do so, we drive him down to the mat and find ourselves right back in our favorite position. When he tries to turn out, you have control of both legs, primary and secondary, and it's awfully hard for him to turn out. This gives us a good opportunity to get a hold of our training partner's knee tendons. And then when we go to release our training partner's leg, we do a good job of getting the tricep or the forearm in front of our training partner's foot. So when he goes to rotate out of here, we're going to get a good opportunity to come up and switch our base so that the direction of his escape is now opposite the direction my knees are pointing. When I bring my foot through and lock it in front, he goes to roll through and finds it very, very difficult. And from here, we can go right into our breaking pressure. Once again, we start off in front of our training partner from that fairly typical half guard situation. We go through and get that initial bump. Now, from here, I take my outside foot and I thread it through to the inside. My lower leg starts the action of moving forward, and we start driving up onto our training partner. What most people are interested here is the idea of coming towards you because they see back exposure. Our thing from here is going to be to go through onto our shoulders. When I put my back on the floor, there's no back exposure. Okay, you can't get to my back because the floor's in the way. And it's very easy for us now to bring our leg up and block a triangle. From here, we guide him straight down to the mat. Off that guide, we expose his knee tendon and lock up. I get everything in front. That's the direction of his escape. Watch him turn his toes. That's what protects his heel. That's why I need my triceps or my forearm in front of his toes. As he goes to rotate through, look how I take my foot and block right there in behind. Now we lock up. He goes to rotate through again and finds himself well blocked. Move to your left. If he was so much bigger than me that his momentum carried him through on the roll, I would just go right with it and switch to the crisscross hashi position. From crisscross hashi, our hips come over his knee and we drive forward into a strong finish. Most of the time, however, from someone your own body size, this double 50 position. As they go to rotate, we'll restrain them long enough that you can get to any one of your favorite braking positions. Okay? If you feel for whatever reason he's able to get his leg free, start turning, this would be a good time for you to come through into 50-50, driving down to an inside shoulder and getting to your finish. Let's have a look at all that together. We start off, I currently have one leg on the inside, one leg on the outside. As we play knee shield, we force his hands down to the mat and we start going in and getting to our grips. From here, I take my outside leg and punch it through to become an inside leg. When I start coming up on my training partner, this is the perfect time for us now to start inverting. There's back exposure on my part. He can start coming after my back. So I want to make sure that I put my back on the floor. And from this situation, if he tries to retreat, I still have locked hands that'll hold him in place. Now I just go through and lock my triangle. That puts us in one of our favorite attacking positions. I expose his knee tendon and lock it up. I get my arm in place. I have the choice between going directly for the heel hook or just putting my elbow in front so as he rotates. I go through and switch off to an Achilles lock. This has the virtue of protecting my back in the double inverted position. If he tries to go back for a misdirectional escape, he can't do it. At some point, we want to go through and expose the heel. I bring my foot in front and we're in position to break. If he's so heavy and strong and fast, the rotation carries us through, just make a switch right there into the crisscross ashi position. When we lock up, bring our pelvis forward, it's done. If he starts interfering with my foot position, pulling feet out, etc., that's a good time to go into your 50-50. If you feel your opponent going underneath your leg and transferring things across, you can always transfer right back into inside Senkaku. You're in a good braking position now and ready to go. All of them will be highly effective in that position.
Let's have a look at the use of an ankle pick grip, which can be very useful from half guard in general. It can be very useful for creating kazushi, for creating sweeps. We'll look at that throughout this video. It's also very useful for entering into variations of leg locks. Let's look first at basic ankle picking. If someone is standing in front of you, typically an ankle pick refers to a situation where I catch my training partner just there. It can also be an inside ankle pick, but for now we'll look at the outside ankle pick where I grab at the Achilles tendon, and typically my intention is to pull forward and sweep them out of balance while I'm holding another part of their body or the mat. Okay. It also occurs in half guard situations, but it'll be different because typically your opponent has changed their position down to their knees. Why would they do that? Well, if they're here in front of us and we catch our training partner here at the heel, they're often worried about the threat of Ashigarami entries. Okay. When they feel the danger of leg locks, they'll often put a knee down on the floor, and then they'll put their second knee down, and you'll find yourself holding that same grip, just like so. And from there's many ways for you to go on the attack. Okay. It can also occur while their knees are on the mat themselves. So if I have a basic half guard situation, I can just sneak my hand through and catch my training partner right there at the heel. Okay, so regardless of whether it started standing or started with him on his knees, we end up in the same situation. Okay, so once again, if someone's standing over us, and from here they put a knee down, and then from here they put their other knee down, you're right there in the same grip. Or if you started down in a more conventional half guard situation, you might just sneak your hand through and catch them right there at the heel, just like so. Turn around. So you get that catch. Okay, that's the grip you got to work with. Interestingly, if your opponent goes to sprawl his leg back, you're going to find it's exceptionally difficult because you're controlling the very end of the lever. Okay, it's a very, it doesn't look like much, but it's a shockingly strong grip when you work in these positions. And we'll see that it has great utility when it comes time to enter into leg locking scenarios. Now, let's have a look at a very simple way of attacking out of this ankle pick grip. We have a training partner. We'll demonstrate it from the knees, but it could also have been done from a standing scenario as well. And we have that ankle pick grip on our training partner. From here, we're going to post across our training partner's chest. As he goes to drive forward, that post makes it difficult and makes it pretty easy for us to get a quasi knee shield in front. Now, between my knee shield and my post, I'm going to take my outside foot, I'm going to convert it into an inside foot, just like so. Rise up. I want my feet, just like so. The sole of my foot, right there on top of my knee. This is easy to get in competition situations because typically your opponent is moving their hips around, trying to keep balance, etc., etc. So here we have a start position in half guard. I put my knee shield in place, I push him over, I go through, and there's my pick, just like so. From the situation, as we post on our training partner, I just take my foot and thread the foot through. Sometimes there will be some jousting here for foot position. I have to push into him, and I push it back, obviously, and from here, the foot is now in place. Now, once we get the foot in place, I want to take my hand and start going through underneath my training partner's cross armpit. From here, I take my foot forward down to the floor. So I have a half butterfly hook and my foot now comes off his calf muscle. And as a result, it's very easy for us to hit a reverse shrimp where I pull my buttocks towards my own ankle. Then I change my direction. I'm currently facing out to my right. And now I face out to my left. From this position, it's a very easy thing for me to throw my leg right over the top and connect my heel straight there to my knee. Now, there's a bunch of obvious ways you can go here, the most obvious of which will be variations of outside heel hooks, where we lock up on our training partner, and then from here, we go spinning on through. From that turn, we rotate, and you have the choice between staying with the Arumi Ashigarami, the standard form of Ashigarami, like so. The key is to get weight over his knee. So when I lift the heel off the mat, we get strong pressure. If you feel your opponent moving his other leg, you may well be tempted to throw your leg over and make the conversion to outside Ashigarami, an even stronger breaking position that uses the closure of your legs to put tremendous pressure over your training partner's knee and create very strong breaks. So once again, you have an opponent working like so. From here, we move the weight over the hands, and I go through and I collect my training partner's ankle. Good well. So that's my target right in there. I put his hand to the floor, I go through and I make my catch. As he comes back in towards me, we're jousting with the knee shield in the frame. Then I see an opportunity to pass my outside foot through and become an inside foot. From here, my bottom leg extends, and as a result, I can hit a reverse shrimp combined with a frame right underneath my training partner's armpit that converts my orientation from out in this direction here to my right to over here to my left. Now I throw my foot through and lock up. I go to rotate. I could stay right here and get very strong braking pressure. Or I could throw my leg over the top and again get strong braking pressure. Now, as good as that is, as an attacking option, there's always other options. So, from that same starting position, we work with our training partner. I go through and I catch my training partner with the heel. As we work here, posting on our training partner, I take my outside foot that comes through and becomes an inside hook, like a half butterfly guard. As always, from here, we're pushing and jousting and getting our knee through behind our training partner's hamstring. And as a result, we can start that same action of going through and underneath the opposite armpit, going from right-hand side orientation across the left-hand side. This time, instead of being happy, going with an outside heel hook, I thread through and connect his shoelaces into my bicep. And from here, my foot switches from behind his buttocks to in front on the opposite side. And as a result, we can punch through and go into one of our favorite attacking positions. I don't want him back stepping out, so I step over his opposite leg and control his foot right there, center chest.
He goes to twist out, turn out, flee the mat, do all those things that people do, and it's so difficult. Now we lock up and we find ourselves in a superb breaking position. If you have a stationary opponent, just go right for the break here. Many of your opponents will try and disentangle the double 50 position. Just follow it, come up, and find yourself across on the other side, ready to go. Once again, from a situation where we start off in a fairly conventional half guard, we get the hand moving across to the opposite side, and we go through and catch our training partner right at the shoelaces. He will want to joust forward and move, so you'll be working behind your frames. From here, I take my outside foot, pass it through, and find it right there in the center. I always want to punch my hips through underneath him. Don't be satisfied with him in front of your knees. Make sure you always punch through, and as a result, you get underneath the center of gravity. My hand's on top, I pommel it, it goes through on bottom. My foot's behind, I pommel it, it comes through in front. Now I thread through and lock. I transfer from right armpit across the left. Now we're in the perfect position to go on the attack. He goes to twist out, move out, etc. That's a difficult thing from here. You've got excellent control over him. His last gambit will be to try and free his secondary leg. If you see that happening, just rotate with it, go through, make sure your hips go on top of his knee, and you'll find yourself in a superb breaking position. Now we're looking at the use of ankle picking grips as an excellent way to enter into our training partner's legs and get strong breaks. One of the best occurs in situations where you can use the ankle pick to knock an opponent to a hip. You will remember from the Kazushi section in this video that one of our great goals is to off-balance an opponent from half guard. Typically half guard is one of the better off-balancing positions, and you know you've done a good job of off-balancing people when you can either knock a hand to the floor or their hip or butt down to the mat. If you can do either one of those two things, you've created the conditions you need to be successful from half guard. So let's look at a situation where I use the ankle pick and I bump my opponent over, down, getting his hip to the mat. What typically happens here is people try to recover their balance. No one likes to be knocked down to a hip. They're not effective in that position. You can get up on top of them. So they go to recover, and that will create an extension in their other leg that will create great opportunities for your leg locks. So, same starting position as all the other methods. From here, we've got our shield in place. We're framing. From here, I force his hand down to the mat, and I go through and I pick my training partner's heel, just like so. Now, as before, I take my outside foot and I convert it to an inside foot. What I'm going to do now is use this inside positioning to knock him down to a hip. How is this possible? Because the initial Kazushi places his hand out to the side, but what he doesn't have is base in the rearward direction. The only base he would have is this foot, but you're holding it. As a result, I can punch with my knee and shin straight up into my training partner and knock him down to a hip on the other side. Did you see what happened to his right leg? It extended naturally as he went down to the floor. We're going to post our hand down to the mat and start crowding our training partner. I use my other leg to gain a height advantage over my training partner, so my hips are higher than his. And as a result, we can easily go through and backstep on our training partner's leg. And as a result, we fall right away into one of our favorite attacking positions. As he goes to twist out, turn out, do all those things that people do, it's awfully difficult to get away. As always from here, we're looking to control our training partner at the knee tendons. When we go to release our training partner's secondary leg, we know it's a race now. We win that race by consistently getting our tricep or forearm in front of our training partner's instep, like so. As he goes to race on out of here, one of the big dangers we face is back exposure. So very often from here, we lock the Achilles grip. So when he goes to rotate back, there's nothing there for him. And as a result, we can rotate safely into a position where we can expose our heel, our opponent's heel, in this backside situation. If he tries to flee the mat, it's a difficult thing to achieve with such a tight Ashigurami in place. and a fairly easy breaking position. You currently have him in the double 50 lock, both of his legs controlled by this outside foot positioning. It's a variation of 50-50 with both legs controlled instead of one. He will want to break that and free his secondary leg. If you see that happening, one good option is to follow and go into a conventional 50-50, down on your inside shoulder and break. Another good option is to go into one of our favorite methods, a crisscross ashi, where he goes to clear out and we just crisscross our legs. So that as we come across the other side, you have one outside foot and one inside foot. So you have the virtues of both inside and outside positioning. From here, I want to come up and put my hips over my training partner's knee. And as a result, you get very, very strong breaks indeed. Another good option under these circumstances is for us to convert up to inside Senkaku. Just be aware that if we do this, we want to use a shoelace variation where our shoelaces go in front of his stomach. As a result, when he tries to push back into us and thwart us, we can just point our knees up at the ceiling and convert it from backside to front side, finishing conditions. This creates an unusually tight triangle around our training partner's knee. When he goes to thumb post and move out, it's almost impossible. When he goes to continue his turn, it's almost impossible. And as a result, from here, we get very, very strong finishes indeed. So let's have a look at all that again. From half guard situation, I have an outside leg and inside leg. I have a knee shield in place, and from here I have conventional arm frames that force my opponent's hand to the mat and give us that ankle pick grip that we often make use of from here. Now, as we play in this position, I convert from outside foot position to inside foot position. I use my knee to bump into my training partner and force the buttocks back towards the mat. As I lock up on my training partner, I take advantage of his extended leg to pass my knee across and capture it with a Kali Basami type action and sit back down into a possible winning position. From here, I expose my training partner's knee tendon and lock up. As I release the secondary leg, I'm mindful to keep my triceps right there in front of his instep. As he tries to rotate out, we're looking to rotate through and catch right there behind his opposite knee. So we're in control of the speed of rotation. Even if he goes into a very fast rotation now, you'll be in the perfect position to thread through and create a situation where he wants to rotate to my right, but my knees are pointing to my left. So that's the direction of his escape. That's the direction of my knees. When he goes to rotate out, it's a very difficult thing. If he was so strong and so much heavier than me that he turned my entire body with the speed of his rotation, it would make no difference. You would just make a conversion to another form of Ashigarami. In this case, it's the crisscross. And as a result, you would go straight into hard breaks. If your opponent uses his hands and is prepared to take some pain and suffering to remove your foot, let it go. As he removes one, just switch off into another form of Ashigarami. If again, he's willing to take breaks and he swims underneath and passes the feet through, just go right back into yet another form of Ashigarami and get to your break. Just understand that because you started in one form of Ashigarami doesn't mean you're committed to that variation. Learn to swim through and pommel from one Ashigarami to another, sometimes inside, sometimes outside, sometimes a compromise of both, sometimes backside, sometimes front side. And when you can go through a variety of Ashigaramis, get into a single break, that's when you're going to get submissions at high level. Let's look at the use of half butterfly guard. This becomes extremely important as you go with better and better opponents who become reluctant to put two knees on the floor inside your half guard. Often this is because you're getting good at a move we'll look at later on in this video, a knee lever, but there could be a bunch of reasons. As a general rule, most of your more talented opponents will try and take their inside knee and remove it from the mat. What does this mean? I have someone in my half guard and they're working from this position. It's not really in their best interest to keep their right knee down on the floor for long periods of time. They generally do better when they hit a partial sit through and take their knee off the mat. That enables them to hit a stronger crossface. It enables them to, as it were, put more driving forward pressure on my body, and it gives them the ability to pass in two directions. They can pass directly across to the mount, or they can pass straight through to side. It also gives them a knee height advantage. Their knee is now higher than my hips, and as a result, the transition across my hips, either to the mount or to the side, becomes significantly easier. When their knee is down on the floor, my hips are higher than their knee, and as a result, moves like a knee lever suddenly become very, very easy. In order for them to pass from here, they would have to take their knee off the floor. So good players very often keep their knee off the floor as a matter of practice. It's their standard operating procedure, and there's a lot of wisdom to this. Now, this is bad insofar as certain moves like knee levers become more difficult, but it's good insofar as it makes it much more easy for me to get into a half butterfly guard from half guard. Now, I can't be naive in the way I do this. I can't just release his leg and try to put my butterfly hook in. He'll backstep and pass my guard. So how we transition here is very important. First things first, I want to start with a simple knee pinch around their upper leg like so. So there's some contact here. Then I want to take my 2 feet and place the soles of my feet right there on his Achilles tendon and calf. Okay, so knee on the floor. When I see his knee come off the mat, my first thing is to follow his hips with my 2 knees. Then I catch 1, 2. So when he goes to back step out, he's not going anywhere. Then I take my top foot and I pommel it through, and it becomes a butterfly hook. Then I take my inside leg and I hook over the top, and you are now in half butterfly guard. I know that seems like a lot of steps, but don't worry, they become very natural as you get better at the move. So as we start off in this position, I see my opponent go to take his knees up. I make sure I follow. I can't be naive. And from here, just have my legs relax, his knees come up, and he just immediately starts straightening passes. So it's important from in here that as I see his knee come up off the floor, my knees follow his hips. Now I go 1, 2. He goes to kick out, and you'll see it's very difficult for him to kick out in a backwards direction. Now from here, I take my foot and I pommel it through and hook. I want solidity both in front and behind his leg. My left butterfly hook gives me solidity in front, but to make a solid contact and connection behind, I use my whole calf muscle. Now when he goes to kick his leg out, it's difficult. When he goes to drive to the mount, impossible. When he goes to cut across to the side, impossible. When he tries to just kick his leg wildly backwards, very, very difficult. So you now have an excellent connection that controls both the front and the back of his leg. This is your starting position. Now, what do I want to do from here? I want to hit an outside elevator that brings him across my body. He's currently on my right-hand side with his hips. I want to bring his hips across my center line. How are we going to do this? I take my hand and I post in my training partner's lat muscle. I bring my knees across towards my center line and I just briefly touch my foot down. I can't stay here forever because your opponent can step over your leg and cause all kinds of problems. And I lift not up, but out in this direction over my shoulder. I do not bench press him, but I do add direction with my hand. Okay, so I'm not using my hands to push him. My leg does the work, but I do add a little assistance here, particularly with direction, making sure that this is the direction he goes. Again, don't lift up. That doesn't do any good at all. Rather, from this initial start, I bring my knees across and then I lift him out in this direction here. And that forces him up into a situation where the legs are split and we're ready to attack. The first attack is the simplest. I just throw my leg straight over his body and find myself in the perfect position to go into an initial attack. From here, look how we get control of our training partner, and I make a choice, which direction do I want to go? Do I want to roll forward? That's certainly one possibility. If you choose the forward roll, make sure that as you roll through, you make the switch over the top and end up here for a strong braking position. Okay, so that's certainly one good option. His knee comes up, our knees follow, we catch, foot goes under, start position. From here, I shift, place my foot on the floor, and send him across. This time, when I bring my foot over the top and get to my training partner's heel, I don't rotate forward, I bring my leg out, and I throw my legs over the top like so. From this position, we're not going to roll, we're going to go into a reverse figure 4 grip. So instead of a conventional grip like so, I switch my forearms and lock in like so. Now, as he tries to turn and face me, we just lock on board and we get a very strong break indeed. So instead of rolling forward, we get the outside Ashigarami. It's safe for me to do this because his hands are on the mat. It's a little risky to get outside Ashigarami before you get a heel when we're sitting down on the floor, because now he can expose my back and there's not much more I can do to stop it. But here, in this position, his hands are on the floor and he's facing away from me. So back exposure is minimal here. So it becomes much safer for us to start locking up the reverse figure 4 grip. Once you get the grip, you're safe from any kind of back exposure. As he goes to turn around and face us, the brake comes on immediately. So those are 2 excellent ways of working initially from those positions. Let's go into some more. Starting position doesn't really change. He's got a good grip on us from down here. Look how we follow his hips with our knee. We stand on the back of his calf muscle. He goes to kick out. It won't be easy. Now we take our foot to the inside position. You've got your half butterfly and you lock in over the top. He goes to kick out and you've got a really nice connection to your opponent's leg now. I put in my guide hand, shift across a little, plant, and then from here, send him outside with the outside elevator, and away he goes. From here, I thread my hand through and we lock. One of our favorite grips from here is to get our training partner's shoelaces in our bicep. When he tries to flee the mat and pull away, it's an enormously difficult thing. And very easy for us now to start transferring our legs. The easiest transfer is with the outside leg going across and turning into double 50. When we turn into double 50 and he tries to rotate through, it's almost impossible. This gives us a ton of time to transfer his foot from one armpit across our chest to the other side and go in and get our breaks. His whole thing now will be to try and free his secondary leg. When we see that occur, we just place our foot on the opposite buttock and go into the crisscross ashi. Now we just commit down to the floor and drive our hips forward. We get to a very strong break. So this is arguably the most realistic of the finishes in high level competition. All 3 are highly effective, but the third definitely has more braking power. So let's have a look at this. We start off, our training partner comes forward chest to chest. I notice he brings the knee up. That's going to make knee levers more difficult, but half guard butterfly easier. Okay, so that's the upside of this situation. From here, step in over the top and capture the back of my training partner's leg. Now I take my foot through and pull it in and lock in over the top. So you've got a really secure lock on his leg now. If he tries to kick out, tries to advance and pass, it's a difficult thing. Now I place my guide hand in, my knees point up at the ceiling, and as a result, when I disengage very briefly, I can use that outside elevator to bring him up and over to the side and expose our training partner's entire leg. I go around the corner. I don't want him fleeing the mat. As he goes to flee the mat, we lock in and trap his shoelaces to our bicep. I bring my knee around the corner. He can go as hard as he wants now. Go. Once you get that foot trapped, as we often say, it's like the knot at the end of a rope. Okay, imagine a long rope being pulled through a small circle, a small hole, and there's a large knot at the end that will stick on the knot. So too with this leg. Now, from this position, look how my outside leg passes over. The inside leg goes across the secondary leg, and you now have double 50. He tries to yank out, pull out. Very, very difficult. The control of the secondary leg gives me more than enough time to successfully transfer his foot across my chest. From center chest, we put it down behind our armpit, and we're ready to play now. His last gambit is going to be to free his secondary leg. A lot of times he won't be able to do that in a time and you'll get the successful submission. But if the guy's willing to take some breaks, then it may well be the case. You have to follow to other forms of Ashigarami. He goes to kick out. We go into crisscross Ashigarami, and we get that good break with nice hip position. If he's a strong fellow and goes to pull my foot free, we might well have to make a switch across into variations of 50-50. Here I'm on my inside shoulder and ready to break. If he goes to break the 50-50 connection, I may well have to make a conversion right back into variations of inside Senkaku. And from here, go into another break. So you see, you can easily pommel from one variation to another of the various Ashigaramis we favor. Now, we're looking at the idea of half butterfly guard as a very good response to an opponent taking a knee off the mat, and also one of the best methods by which we can go into leg locks from half guard. It gives you inside control with both legs. It gives you a lot of versatility to enter into Ashigarami. Let's have a look now at one of the most practical and effective methods. We have an opponent here in front of us in a fairly standard half guard situation. We've got a low shield across. We're forming frames, and from here, just like the previous move, we're able to get our foot through and around in front of our training partner. In situations like this, very often we're going to be able to get a hold of our training partner's opposite leg, just like so, and then from here, go through and get a hold of the opposite armpit, forming very, very useful cross frames across in front of our training partner. When he tries to come forward on us, it's a difficult thing to achieve. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my bottom leg. I'm going to take it off just like so. And we're going to hit something analogous to a kind of a sumigashi movement, which takes him up and over my head, just like so, and enables us now to go through on the training partner and catch our training partner right here with a single leg. Okay? So I just go through like I was going to grab a single leg on the feet, but of course we're in a very different situation now. I'm almost north-south on my training partner, and as a result, my leg can push through on his inner thigh and start getting his hips moving in a forwards direction. The most common response we get here is people like, oh my God, I'm about to be leg locked. So they all go to flee the mat. But when they do this, they go right into what you wanted, a good catch over your training partner's leg. Okay? Now from here you have a bunch of good options. Arguably, this is one of the single best attacking positions in the entire leg lock game. Why? Because you're backside on your opponent. He can't fight you with his hands. In any front side situation, you have to hand fight every time you're going in for your attacks. One of the great advantages of backside is that your opponent can't really hand fight, and he has to turn and face you, and that takes an awfully long time that he just doesn't have. Now, your first option from here will be inside Senkaku, where we lock up and we recognize that if we put our foot on our training partner's back, it's not optimal. He can push back into us and hide his heel. Make it very hard for us to get any kind of satisfactory braking mechanics. So instead, we back heel the Senkaku and put our shoelaces in front of his hip. So any movement backwards on his part is suicide. It will enable us to roll him through into one of the tightest variations of Ashigarami of them all, the shoelace Ashi. Now from here, it's just a very, very strong braking position. We just bring our hips up into our training partner and it's done. Okay? So that's one great option. Back up. Hands on the floor. Knees off the mat. Now, from here, second great option. Instead of going with inside foot position, we're going to go across outside. Our favorite option initially from here is always double 50. This involves trapping our training partner's secondary leg from the outside, then casting the foot through and around and getting the shoelaces in front. Why is this such a fine option? Because it ties up both of my training partner's legs instead of one. When he goes to back step and go front side, it's very, very tough for him to do so. He's only got a very short period of time, and we can go into very, very strong breaks from this position.
This forces our opponent to go in and try and interfere with that leg. Try and use his hand to clear it and free his leg. Okay? If we see him motion in that direction, you can always go through into variations of crisscross ashi, where we lock our legs in a crisscross shape around our training partner. Okay? You can also allow this to happen organically. If he starts taking my foot off and goes to rotate out, then from here, I just rotate through and my feet crisscross over my training partner's hip. This is a very, very strong braking position, and you can get a lot of mileage out of this. Another fine option from here is just to go into a generic 50-50 type situation. My opponent goes through, takes the foot off, and from here we lock up a classic backside 50-50. One thing to be careful of here, don't offer your foot for a figure 4 toe hold from your opponent. Make sure your toes point down towards the mat, and he won't have time to make any adjustments because you're already there in your lock. If your opponent should backstep out of this, just follow down to an inside shoulder. Don't create situations where your hands are exposed to your opponent's counterattacks. Make sure your back faces your opponent. You're locked in place. He tries to come forward to fight your hands. Just drive forward with your hips and you'll get the finishes you seek. So once again, from a different angle. From an initial half guard situation, we're locked up. However it occurs as he goes to drive forward into us, we find we're able to insert that half butterfly hook. As we form frames across in front of our training partner, we're able now to get his weight moving. Watch how my foot comes down towards the floor, and we start something like a sumigashi action on our training partner, lifting out to the side. Once we get that lift, my whole thing is to use this hand to sweep my body up into an inverted position on my two shoulders. And then from here, my arm shoots through, rather like a single leg. As he goes to flee the mat, you get that good bite around your training partner's leg. From here, we catch our training partner at the heel and we make our choice. Where do we want to go? So many good options from here. One great one is the crisscross ashi, where we lock in place just like so. This is one of the favorite of my students, a very strong braking position. Another is the shoelace ashi, where we rotate through and convert it front side from back side. Another big favorite is to throw our legs over the secondary leg, the double 50 position. And this too is a very fine braking position. If you should feel you're not able to control that, you can always convert to the front side version of crisscross ashi. And of course, lurking in the background, you've always got your basic 50-50. Just make sure if we're backside, don't expose your feet to counterattacks. Make sure the toes are always pointed away from your opponent. It's a fine braking position. If he does convert it to front side, make sure you don't face him with your hands and chest. It's too easy for him to hand fight and then start counterattacking your legs. Instead, come down to your inside shoulder. Get your back and hips facing back towards him to protect your hands from his hand fighting. As he tries to drive forward, just use your hips over his knee to drive forward for your finishes. Just one more time, looking at the single leg itself. From any situation where we're working from half butterfly guard, as we work in here, we get frames in place and we start moving our training partner's head out to the side, and we hit an action almost like a sumigashi. Watch my right foot come off underneath my training partner, and then the left foot start moving our man out into the side. This hand and this foot are the keys. My left hand pulls and my right foot pushes. Then this hand goes all the way up and pushes my knee on top of his knee. So when he goes to flee, it's such a tight bite on the leg, it's almost impossible to get away. Now, from here, we go in and score. My personal favorite
is always crisscross ashi, where I cast my foot through and lock. It has the benefits of both inside and outside foot position. If he goes to flee the mat now, it's almost impossible, and the braking pressure is very impressive. If he goes into a back step, it does him no good. You're right there in the perfect braking position, ready to go. So there you have it, single leg, out of half guard, butterfly.